Agile approach to startup development comes from the Agile methodologies that were proposed by software developers. The main goal of Agile methodologies was the following: to successfully manage non-standard projects in which one can get understanding of final results and a set of methods to achieve them only through the process of making the project. So it's the idea that to get a result, we need to learn, and only through learning, only through doing things, can we understand how to make the things properly. This approach showed itself as very successful in the sphere of software development by IT practitioners, by programmers, and in many cases it was successful in innovation management, in R&D development, project development. As an example, let us look at 4 main ideas of Agile Manifesto that was proposed and taken by software developers. It has 4 main points. First, individuals and interactions are more important than processes and tools. Second, working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. The third is customer collaboration, which is more important than contract negotiation. And the fourth is that responding to change is more important than following the plan. Taking these ideas from software development to startup development, we see that actually this works perfectly well for startups. Precisely, when making a startup, we should put individuals and interactions as more important thing than anything else. We should look at working minimal viable products and deliver them as fast as possible to our potential consumers, and this is more important than making documentation about them. We need to collaborate with consumers in order to get the feedback from them, and it's much more important than contracts, negotiations, and other things. And startup founders, startup team should always be ready to respond to changes. Startups is learning. Only through learning, startups find the right path in order to be successful. And if we want to learn, we should be ready that learning is always by trying, by failing, and through failure, learning something new, and then coming to success. So, respond to change and be ready to fail is a crucial point to get to a final success of a startup. Agile approach to startups is based on the following ideas. The work during the startup development is done by self-organizing cross-functional teams with specialists from different fields that organize their work by themselves and set the rules by themselves, and they defined what should they do during the next period of time. These teams work in time-limited interactions called sprints, and at the beginning of each sprint, they define the list of tasks they plan to do. They define the hypothesis they want to test and through which they want to learn something. And then at the end of each sprint, they analyze the results, and through this analysis, they form a list of tasks for another sprint, the next sprint. Usually, in many cases, the sprints last for about a week, though there are no rules why it should be only like that. And the final result, through these sprints, teams are developing a minimal viable products that can be given to consumers, tested, and then when we get the feedback from the consumers, we get some information which can be used to form new hypotheses, and again the teams start new sprints in order to work with this information to develop better products. As an example, how it can be organized, let us look at Scrum methodology, one of the widely used, though not the only methodology in this sphere. What are the main elements? Three big elements. The first is roles. What are the roles in these cross-functional, self-organized teams? Product owner. Product owner is the one who defines the basic features of the product. Specific thing about startups is that usually the product owner should be the startup founder, because startups may not know their consumers, or the consumer segments may change throughout the development of a startup. So usually startups start by forming the hypothesis about their ideal product, and these hypotheses are usually come from the vision that is in the head of startup founder. Apart from product owner, there are also a Scrum Master and a delivery team. Scrum Master is the one who is managing the work throughout the sprints, and delivery team are the people who make the tasks and work with the ideas of startup in this sprint. Second element is practices. Scrum methodology uses the following main practices. Daily Scrum meetings, basically the meetings of a team, in order to sum up the results of this day of work. Sprint review meetings, which are usually at the end of a sprint, and sprint abnormal termination, another practice that can that mean that by some circumstances we can terminate, we can stop the sprint if we see that the results are do not allow us to move forward, or we are moving in the wrong direction. The third element of Scrum methodology is artifacts, which can be also called documents that are used in Scrum. These are the product backlog, which is also the main description of a product, the features of this product. The sprint backlog, which is the description of the sprint we are in right now, and burned out chart, which is basically a document that shows us the speed of finishing hypothesis testing for the hypothesis that we want to work with in the specific sprint. Agile methodology for startup development can be run through a customer development model proposed by Steve Blank and Bob Derf. This customer development model consists of 4 stages: customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and customer building. Let's look at this process in detail. So the first step, customer discovery, is the process of the search of our customer. We try to define who our customer may be. After this step is mostly a step of forming hypothesis. This hypothesis comes from the vision that the startup founders may have, and usually this is the vision that forced startup founders to start the startup. Then the next step is customer validation. The hypothesis need to be tested. We may think that our customers should be this group, but it may be another group. And by testing out the hypothesis, we create minimal viable products. We deliver them to our consumers, and by their reaction, we see whether we've guessed it right, and getting the information from them, we may develop another features in the product, or maybe change our potential consumers. Yes, this process can pivot many times, and this search can continue until we validate the consumers. Then we come to another part, another step, which is customer creation, and it's already the idea of execution. Here we start working with our consumers and start establishing a relationship with them. And when we find the ideal way of relations with the consumers, we come to company building, which is already the steps that we need to take in order to make our business model repeatable and make it profitable. And to summarize all this, let us look at 9 deadly sins or 9 greatest mistakes that startups in many cases make. Steve Blank and Bob Dorff name the following 9 deadly sins. The first is the assumption, I know what the consumer wants. Startup can know what the consumer wants only after testing the hypothesis. So only after delivering the minimal viable product can we learn about our consumers. At the beginning, we have only the vision of the founders, which should be tested. The second thing is the saying, I know what features to build. No, the knowledge of features needed by the consumers can come only from consumers, the knowledge about consumers. So again, only after getting information from consumers can we search for the right features we need to put in our products. Third deadly sin is the focus on launch date. In many cases, we need to build some plans with some dates by which we want to do something. But startups are in search of their product, in search of their consumer segment, and this process of searching, the process of learning can take longer than it's expected. So when we force ourselves to get some results by some specific date, we just make this search process not so efficient as it should be if it follows its own pattern of learning how it should be. The fourth deadly sin is emphasis on execution instead of hypothesis testing, learning, and interaction. So again, startup is about learning, not about executing a plan. Plans should be revised as soon as we get new information. Yes. Connected with these, the fifth deadly sin is traditional business plan presume no trial and errors, and startups need these trials and errors in order to find the right business model. The sixth connected to this is the deadly sin of confusing traditional job titles with the job titles that startups need and the problems that startups need to accomplish. So again, marketing in startups is different from marketing for established businesses. It's not about executing plans, it's about searching, and many startups may need specific job titles that do not exist in the market, do not exist in other companies, and it's okay. The next deadly sin is that sales and marketing execute to the plan. And of course, the plans may not work as we want them to work in startups, because if we are searching for the consumers, it's very hard to understand how to promote our product, how to advertise it, and so on and so forth. The eighth deadly sin is the presumption of success leads to premature scaling. So in many cases, startups starting scaling their business when the hypotheses were not tested and just in order to execute the plan and to make it successful as soon as possible, startups were delivering the products that were not needed, that had features that consumers didn't need, and that were not developed properly. And the ninth deadly sin is that management by crisis leads to a death spiral. When startups move forward and face some difficulties, sometimes they start to manage their activities as the crisis. The more money they've already spent, the greater is this feeling that the crisis comes because you don't have money to move forward. But actually, when startups see that something is not working as they are expecting it to happen, it's very valuable information. It's exactly the information we need in order to understand what should we do in order to be successful. So you shouldn't think about it as a crisis, but as an opportunity to learn what should we do in order to be successful. So, to sum up, as we see, the startup development is a process of learning how to work, learning who our customers are, learning what they need and how we can do what they need. And the crucial points of this process of startup development is the development of minimal viable product and the process of learning, and through this learning, making our products better.